Welcome back everyone to part 8 of the 25 Quattro S4 build series. I'm Steve. Welcome to Figure It Outie if this is your first time joining. Also, I'm on Instagram at Figure It Outie and you can follow me there for lots of little updates in between project builds and stuff like that. But today is the big one. It's the one that you and I have been waiting for over a year. That's how long it's been since this engine last ran, and today she's gonna run and we might just go for a little spin. Okay, here's my game plan. What I want to do is the least amount of reassembly and work required to just see if the engine can start and make sure I don't have any leaks. So that means I will not be hooking up the cooling system right now. So the front carrier is going to stay off for all of this. But I do want to hook up two things. One I really have to, which is the oiling system. And one part I have to put on for that is just the external oil cooler. Right now I've got it left at just the two lines coming off of the JHM adapter from the side of the block. So that has to be patched up or else I can't fill it with oil. So I'm going to do that. Another one is power steering. Now technically, I don't think it'd be that bad to start the car, but I know in these cars, the power steering pump is driven basically off of the engine and it will be spinning. And even though I'm not going to touch the wheel or anything like that, I really don't like the idea of having the power steering pump spinning with no lubrication in it. So I want to make sure that I do something about power steering too. Now the start's going to be interesting because I want to prime the oil system first. Like I said, hasn't been running a long time, so I don't want to just go for a full start. I need to prime some of the oil through the system to make sure that the cylinders and the heads have something in there so I don't get insane chain slap when it starts up. But I would just put a little bit of fuel into that. However, that's my second area of concern, which is a fuel leak. So a few episodes back, I mentioned that I changed the fuel filter, but that I kind of snapped one of the little claws that seats over the barb on the back of the fuel filter, and I might have a leak. So if that's the case, I would end up having to drop the tank and fish out that line and time and money. But I don't want to fill up the tank before figuring this out. So first, dry prime, put a little fuel in, see if I have a leak. If all goes well, full start. Okay, well, oil and power steering is already ready to go here. I hope I'm not underthinking my plan here. I was just thinking that the two power steering lines would actually have to run through a little hole in the front lock carrier. You know, if something was to go wrong, I'd have to pull that apart, lose a bunch of fluid. I think this is the easier way to go. I don't know. I'm ready though. The oil cooler is hooked up, all the fittings are tight, and it's sitting on this stool at about the same height that it's going to be. Because I'm not quite sure how that's going to affect my reading of my oil level, but that's all good. I should kind of call out that it's a bit confusing how this should be run. I've got it wrapped around the chassis right here, like so. This is generally speaking what the instructions look like from JHM, but it's not super specific. So I hope that works out and I don't have to take these lines apart later. And then the power steering is actually just super simple. I took part of the barbs and clamps out of the JHM kit for the external power steering cooler, and I just looped the lines. So there is no cooler on here right now, but it gives me at least a closed system that I can put fluid into now, which is the next step. So in goes oil, in goes power steering fluid, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, dry prime time. When I said dry earlier, I just meant no fuel. And the way I'm going to achieve no fuel is that I pulled out fuse number 28 in the panel right beside the driver's leg rest there. And it is basically right here, left-hand side, third up from the bottom. It's a 20 amp fuse for the fuel pump. There is no fuel in the car, but I didn't want the fuel pump trying to pump something that wasn't there anyways, so I just popped that out. And I have put 10 liters of so-so castor oil into the engine. So that was just, you know, some stuff I get on sale at Costco, but you might remember that I said I'm going to be doing an engine flush later. So that's why I'm going to put this in now and then do a whole flush and put my good oil in after the fact. I put in 10 liters though, which is actually kind of interesting because it's overfilled. Technically, the capacity of these engines are 9.5 liters-ish, but I actually don't know how much additional capacity that the external oil cooler and its lines are going to add. So I overfilled, expecting that I'm going to do this crank here in a second and it's going to get sucked down and moved around, and then I'll actually be below my mark again. So part of this is me trying to just figure out what is the new oil capacity of this engine with the mods that I've done. What I'm about to do is kind of like a compression test actually. So I've got the charger hooked up onto the battery. The battery is at 100% already, but I want the charger running because we're going to be relying on the starter to throw the engine over, and it's going to be a little bit of work for it. So give it some extra juice. And I'll have the throttle all the way open to relieve some of the compression pressure, I guess so to say. I'm not pulling the spark plugs or the coil packs to have like a totally free non-compression type of cycle here. So it's not exactly like a compression test, but we just want to get things freely moving and move that oil around. So well, let's do it. This is a little nerve-wracking for no good reason here, but here we go. Okay, let's go check it out. All right, I just took a little look and it looks like the oil cooler is still completely empty. So I'm going to give it a lot of cranks this time and really get things moving, see what happens. All right, took a quick look and the oil level did go down, so I topped it up a little bit and I'm gonna give it extra cranks this time. And we're up to about 11 liters of oil in the system right now, and I'm gonna do one more round of cranking and we're probably good here. So far so good. I don't see any oil leaks out of the trouble areas I was kind of watching. Namely, I wanted to see if there's anything coming out around the adapter plate back here on the block. That's looking dry. And anything down behind the oil filter assembly looks good too. Now that I have spacers here, I can actually shine in the light and look all the way to the back, which is really, really handy. And no oil coming out of any other spots. And we've sort of come to a bit of a stabilization point in the oil level. It's not going down. I can tell the oil cooler isn't really filling up. That just means that the first start is going to have to be brief, and then I'll check back in on that oil level soon. So on to fuel. Now the fuse is already back in for the fuel pump, and I'll fill up a couple liters worth of some sweet 93. Now that the fuel's in, what I've done is just disconnected the coil pack harnesses here, because this time we were testing for fuel pressure. I want to make sure that there's no spark and just run the fuel up into the line, up into the cylinder. I'll have to be careful because I don't want to flood the cylinders too. And then I'll just check under the car and see if the filter fittings can actually hold that fuel pressure. I also have the back seat out right now so I can hear the pumps prime, and let's see what happens. Okay, this is it. No drips on the fuel filter. The coil pack harness is plugged back in. It's go time. Okay, oh my God, I'm so nervous. Everything checked out though, so here we go. Yeah, she wants it. Probably still moving fuel. Just thinking about it. Okay, I put a little more fuel in there. I think it's just time to be brave. Oh shit! What a champ. Okay, let's go check it out. Oh yeah. Oh, we gotta hear that exhaust. Yeah, buddy. Let's check the fuel. Looking dry. Oh my God, it's running so well. Smooth as hell. Okay, let's shut her down. Let's check the oil level. She runs. That was so sick. I actually gave it a little bit of throttle off camera there, and it was pretty loud. It sounded so sick though. So now the game plan is to continue just, I'm gonna turn it back on and let it warm up a little bit. I'll be careful, obviously, because there's no coolant in there, but I need it to get through a heat cycle now to make sure that we're still leak free. And so I'll just let it run for a little bit here, and I'll check in again in a second. So it's the next day after I let it run for a while, and there's a little drip of oil on the floor. and I have a rear main seal leak. I just do, straight up. And to be honest, I kind of always knew that. I just haven't run the engine in so long, there hasn't been oil in it, that it sort of just fell out of mind. And in hindsight, with all the effort that I put into the car, yeah, I probably should have just pulled the engine and did the whole timing and did that seal and a bunch of other things. But here we are now. And the truth is, I'm not going to do anything about it. I've cleaned it up really good. It's something I'm going to keep my eye on. And I do have really big future plans for this car too. But I'm just going to let it drip a little bit. I know that's not a really good answer, especially for the level of quality that I usually like to promote on this channel here. But it's just not the right timing to tackle that for me. So I'm just gonna let it ride. And as you can probably tell, my voice is a little bit hoarse today. I was at a wedding last night. I'm tired, so what's gonna happen now is I'm just gonna start putting things back together on the car, because overall the first test went really well there. And I need to put the front carrier on, plumb up the cooling, and do some other things. So you're about to get a montage. What you just watched was about 4 evenings of work for me to actually install both the power steering cooler and the external oil cooler, and basically just like put the front end back together. And it took 4 days because it was actually not quite as easy as I thought it would be. And I have lessons learned, so let me share them with you now. Number one is the thermostat. So in previous episodes, you heard my hesitation, not really being sure about how to run the 2 lines that come up to the thermostat correctly. I didn't know if they should wrap up around like they do now, or if it should go under and come up from above, because of course we do have this cross member sticking out here where the crash bar absorbers are mounted onto. And really you have a choice whether it's above or below, and you got to make a call. I made the call of above, and luckily enough, maybe kinda, I don't know, it worked out perfectly. So they come up right directly beside the alternator. I know you can't really see anything at this point, but trust me when I say they are directly sandwiched between the bar and the alternator. The 90-degree fittings transition into the thermostat, which is upside down, and that is really just the case of how it kind of wrapped around. But then I connected it with the 90-degree fittings, which are perfect. JHM did a good job sort of knowing that they have to come through this section right here, which I did clearance. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but there's a little rectangle that's usually right here, and you need to get rid of it. It gives you just enough slack for this top line to kind of extend a little bit to make sure that the front cooler actually mounts level. Additionally, what I found was that the lines have to go above the shock absorber, not below. Again, it makes the difference of maybe an inch or two of slack, but it counts. And then what I also did was notch the air guide right here. I wanted to make sure that I kept it. It is functional. It's important to keep these things. So I just put some notches into it, and that let the guide completely securely bolt into its OEM position just fine. But what really threw me off was that guy right there. I should have mounted that up for mock purposes earlier. It's the crash bar, because when it goes across, you run into a couple of things. Clearance, mostly. What I learned was that it will hit the top outermost part of the top of the cooler here if you mount it too high. In fact, I even was having clearance issues with the little nub here on the zip tie being too high. So what I've done here is moved the topmost zip ties here down to the 3rd row. And I know this seems insanely specific, but if you want all the air possible, so I've mounted this as low as I can. If you want all the cooler to be showing and not covered by the bar so you can get maximum air flowing through it and not have the bar hit anything, this is literally what you need to do. And this is secured on here really, really well, even though I move these down a little bit. And I clear the fittings, and when the bar goes across, the oil cooler is totally exposed, and then likewise the power steering cooler is exposed above the crash bar. Also, don't make the mistake that I did and button down the AC condenser too fast. I removed this thing about 400 times, just trying to make sure everything was level and secure, but you're going to need access behind the condenser and in front of the radiator because these zip ties, if you're not familiar with them, you actually just stab them through the fins of the condenser, and then there's a little circle clip on the back there that slides onto it like a zip tie would be, sort of like it just kind of like notches in and locks in place. And you're going to need to apply pressure on the backside of the condenser. So I had this thing tilted forward 100 different times to make sure that everything was secure and level. When it comes to efficiently plumbing the lines for JHM's power steering cooler here, I really did not figure out what the trick was. You're kind of screwed one of two ways. One is if you do not mount the lines to the cooler first, it's really hard to mount the lines to the cooler when it's stuck against the AC condenser because you can't really wrap your hand around the line and try to shove it on there. So that's difficult. So you can do that first. But then I also was challenged on the other side of things trying to connect the barb that goes from the lines that you need to plumb, which I'll give credit actually look really OEM and really nice through these grommets here, through the air guide. Trying to push them onto the barb and connect them to the existing power steering lines in such a tight spot is really tricky too. So you can pick that first and have troubles up there, or do that first and have troubles back here. But now that the struggle's done, I get to revel in how badass this looks. I'm interested to see what I'll be able to see through the bumper when I put it back on too. It's always a bit of a flex if you've got some external coolers stacked up in the front of the car. So I'm just about at the first road test now, but I need to do a couple of things. And teaser, at the end of this video, I will be showing you my new wheels and tires. You may have noticed in the background of previous episodes that I already gave my black rotor wheels to my wife's wagon a while back, so I had to pick something, and I have some really, really sick wheels. Also, if you follow me on Instagram, you probably would have seen them already, so you can check me out at FigureItAudi. But first, I need to bleed the power steering and fill the coolant. Now, if you've never done a power steering bleed on your car before, it's actually pretty simple, but it's important that you do it right. And I have a video right here on the channel that can teach you how to do that. And likewise, when I do the coolant fill, I'm not just gonna pour the fluid in and let it cycle and do it sort of like the old slow way. I have another video on my channel of a vacuum and air purge tool that helps you suck the coolant straight into the system when you've pulled all the air out of it, which is really, really handy. So like I said, check that out too. So I'm gonna do all that stuff off camera here, and I will meet you back for the wheel and tire reveal. Okay, here it is, the big reveal. Boom, BBS CHR 146s. So this is their 18 by 8.5 wheel. It's in titanium, and this thing is gonna look so good against the Avis silver paint. Quick little story about these wheels. They sort of fell into my hands. They were on Kijiji, they were a great deal, and it turns out some old guy was using these as his winter wheels, and I don't know how ballin' you gotta be to run CHRs for winter, but hey, that's fine. His loss is my gain for sure. They're a little bit damaged, they're not in like perfect condition, but it was a good deal overall. And I was actually looking at these for the wagon, but before I committed to this purchase here, I threw my rotors onto the wagon. You've probably seen the community post I did about it a while back, and they looked like really good. Those big 19s filled out the wheel arches quite nicely, and just the black looked correct on that type of silver, and the titanium actually didn't look all that good. So I did a little switcheroo, and I'm really, really happy I did, because I'm gonna benefit big on these wheels, and I'll tell you why. So I actually used to run a set of RS4 reps on my old A4, and those are just, you know, a normal cast wheel. But if you live anywhere like Edmonton, you know that there's lots of potholes, and eventually you're gonna slam into them, and cast wheels get just absolutely mangled. That's what happened to mine. They ovaled out, I had a lot of vibration in the wheel, and I had to eventually unload those because it was either that and get something new, or actually send them into repair, and that's just not something I wanted to do. So I knew that eventually when I had a better car, I needed to get a set of quality wheels. And my biggest concern is solved with the way that BBS uses their flow forming technology to create wheels in their performance line, which the CHRs are a part of. So check out this really quick snippet of BBS explaining their flow forming technology back in the day in lovely 240p, because it's actually really interesting and you get to see how the flow forming is actually created.
In another furnace, the wheel is reheated to the ideal temperature of 300 to 350 degrees. Then it is mounted concentrically on a negative mold. In a uniaxial movement and under high contact pressure, a continually lubricated roller head creates a rotational profile. It's done on the principle of the potter's wheel. The heated metal is simultaneously molded and compressed. This results in more stability, combined with less use of material and less overall weight. BBS is considered the pioneer of this process. It's known as flow forming.
And the other huge part about why I wanted to pick these up, you know, I did think about, is 18 a little bit too small? I'm going from 19s. Is it really worth it? Well, once you look at the weight of the total package, it really is. I'm going to be saving 4 pounds per corner on each of these wheel and tire setups. Here's a quick video of me proving that. The old 19s, fully balanced, inflated with air, the whole enchilada against the new ones here. And I'm saving a really significant amount of weight, and I can't wait to feel what that feels like. And of course, BBS is a motorsports company. They have been for a long time, so they put all of their motorsports tricks into the construction of the wheels too. You can see on the front, on the inside of the spokes here, they've milled out a lot of weight, just to the point where they can still retain all the strength, but they can cut out a couple grams here and there. And then, as many wheel companies do actually, there's a little bit of milling on the back of the main spokes as well. But I have to hit you with a little bit of math here really quickly, because I didn't want to change the geometry on the car suspension, and I actually liked how those 19s looked. They really filled out the wheel arches quite nicely, and it gave a really tough look to the car. So what I wanted to do was figure out what I'm going to do with the tires to keep the total dimensions the same. And what I mean by that is the old rotors were 19s, also by 8.5, and they were running a 255 tire, which this also is still, but a 35% sidewall height. So what I wanted to do is figure out, okay, if that total height from tire to tire, top and bottom, is 26 inches, what's the same version of a tire on an 18-inch wheel that's 8.5, so that I can get the same overall proportions? And really, here's what the math proved to me. It's that you can move an inch in wheel size, and you have to move 5% on the sidewall ratio. So the old one was that 255/35. This is also a 255, but it's just in a 40, and that gives me the exact same dimension. The only tangible difference that there was that the rotors were 35 millimeter offsets. These are 38. So what I have running on here is what I always use, an H&R spacer. This is a 3 mil spacer, so it's going to push it right back out to the same flushness with the fender, which I really liked. And of course, I got to talk about the rubber for a second here, because honestly, this was something I was a little worried about. You can spend a lot of money on tires, as you guys know. Pretty easy to go drop $2 grand on a set of Michelin Pilot Sports or something from Continental, and that was not in the budget after all the work that I did on this car. So I got a buddy locally here who works at a shop that helped me find what I think is actually a sleeper pick these days, which is the Firestone Firehawk Indy 500. These are really reasonably priced. I think all in, just on the rubber, I was about 1,200 bucks Canadian, which is pretty decent actually. And they have a really nice aggressive pattern on it. The insides remind me of the Michelin PS4 S's actually. And the beauty here is that they're a 320 tread wear tire. So they're not just going to go falling apart in a couple of seasons. If you drive pretty hard, they can probably withstand a track day. Maybe, you know, probably should switch it out for a different tire package at that point, but they could probably do the trick too. But again, all around, great option. Okay, enough talk. I've got the other 3 already mounted up. I'm going to throw this one on, car's going on the ground, and we're going for a drive. You know what I haven't seen in a long time? The car being on the ground. And here's how the wheels turned out. I think it looks pretty solid actually. Style's great, color match is really good. You know, it doesn't look quite as nicely filled out as a 19-inch wheel does, I'll admit, but there's something about this look that's just sort of tough, you know? Maybe it's also something to aspire to, because the meats are just big enough where it's kind of like the car better be a little loud and a little fast to be able to live up to that look. So let's go for a little drive. All I'm trying to do here is do a full heat cycle, listen for vibrations and weird stuff. I'm really just going around the block here, then it's going to come straight back up on the lift. I'm going to check for leaks, and I'm going to double back to that transmission fluid fill level too. First impressions though, it is not that loud in here. I'm pleasantly surprised that there isn't more vibration because of the mounts that we put in. Oh, I forgot to clean my windshield. This thing's just a big dust pile. But yeah, the vibration is really fine. No serious NVH. Oh man, it's louder for sure. I think I hear something. There's a rotational noise. Can't tell where it's coming from. Oh, maybe it's in the front. God, it's hard to tell. And the fact that the car's louder now doesn't really help with diagnosis. All right, we'll do a full lock radius turn here. I always like to do a couple of these like complete inner circle turns. I've got bump steer, 100%. The suspension needs to be corrected. I could hear the tire slipping out every turn. That noise is a mystery. I don't hear it right now at all. Doesn't seem to be speed based or turning based. Oh yeah. Definitely has that muscle feel, which I love. Better head back to home base here. Take a look in the front, figure out what's going on. Okay, a couple more days have passed here and I have most of a car back together. Honestly, 99% of this car is back together, minus a duct and the front bumper. And that's because I could not replicate that noise. Brought it back, put it back up on the stands, and it wasn't there during idle, and it wasn't there when I was revving it out a little bit more. So granted, I didn't take it for another road test, but I figured if it was in the wheels or something rotational in the car, it can't really matter because I didn't touch any of that stuff. So I'm chalking it up to just some bad juju that's been in the car that's just been sitting here for a year, and it kind of just like went away. So I've gone ahead and reassembled most of what you just saw there. And now I'm dealing with the ducting. So this one is not a big deal, but this guy right here is posing a little challenge, and I'll tell you about it. You'll remember that I deleted my auxiliary radiator on the passenger side there. That's part of the overall kit to run the external oil cooler, and man, this is looking pretty sweet in there. But you run into a very specific problem that I haven't seen documented online so far. I think I'm the first one to attempt to do what I'm about to do. So here's what's up. The duct on this side connects at 2 points, that hole at the top right there, and that guy right there, to the radiator itself on that tab and this one down here. But if you're removing the radiator, now you don't have anything to secure your duct to, unless you are willing to get rid of your radiator entirely. Since mine is leaking, this is essentially a piece of junk. And if I were to remove 98% of this, what I'd actually be looking at is 2 mounts. So for the last time on this project, I'm gonna bust out my rotary tool, get cutting, and I'll be left with 2 perfect looking, and I'll paint them black, OEM supplied brackets for my air duct. I got a haircut. It's a little short. Moving on. After a little bit of cutting and sanding and painting, this is what you're left with. It's kind of hilarious. It looks perfect because, you know, it is. It's going to mount right up to the OEM locations. But you can just picture the radiator that used to be in the middle of all this. So I will put this into the car in a second here, and I'll just note that the other duct is all hooked up here. It was all rusted out and I had to drill out the studs on the little bracket, and I fixed a lot of stuff that I haven't really bored you guys with along the way, but trust me when I say it's coming together and things are looking really, really nice. Installed, nice and firm. Do note that I did end up having to clearance a little bit of the duct up here to pass by the AN lines. It's hot today. I've got a little bit of the Adam LZ sweat going on here. Bumper's about to go on, and I just want to call out the absolute tragedy that is the design of these things. I guarantee you if you take off your bumper right now, these supports here where it has the reverse thread bottom half and then the little plastic up on the top, I guarantee that one of them are broken on your car. I was lucky, I kind of patched together one good one with the not broken stuff that was on my car, and I actually had to go buy another one of these units here to make sure that it works, but they're just the worst design. If anyone out there knows something about like 3D printing or any kind of design where you can replicate an OE part, hit me up on Instagram. I want to know more about how to make something like that happen. This is such a huge opportunity for the aftermarket community to build something that's better, that breaks on everybody's cars. God, the DTM bumper looks good.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But
It is the best one of all time. So this is about to look like a real car in a second here. Bumper is on. God, that looks good. And I just got to flex here for a second because I care about the quality of all my stuff. I took my fender liners outside and I scrubbed them by hand with some Dawn soap, and I gave them a good hose down because I want everything to be nice. I've made one more last minute modification here, and it's installing a set of the Ringer Racing wheel studs. Now, I used to run these on my A4 to solve this exact same problem, but what I was noticing when I got the car back from the test run is that on the OE wheel bolts here, I was only getting about 4 rotations of thread engagement into the hub, and I was not feeling good about that. If you look at any documentation that you get with H&R spacers, and I believe them, I'm sure they did the research, they say that you need 7.5, very specific, I know, rotations of your wheel bolt into the hub in order to have proper secure engagement. So I wasn't getting that, and I decided to put these bolts back on. I have the man style kit. You can see on the bench here that there's a pretty significant difference between the length of your wheel studs versus the OE bolt, and with that kit you also get 2 different sizes of nuts you can choose. I picked the 17 and 19 conical nuts, and you also get a set of wheel locks with them. I get 2 major benefits out of running these studs. One, it's actually really easy to mount your wheel because you sort of just slide it on there. But 2, you don't have to buy new wheel lugs all the time. So if you get a 2mm spacer, you don't have to go and buy a whole set of bolts that are 2mm longer. So it's 29mm, so you avoid all that rigmarole. Like I said, I do have firsthand experience running these studs. I have run them for about 1.5 years with the old car, so believe me when I say they are safe to run. I know there are naysayers out there that say press-ins are the only way to go because these ones will back out. And you know what? That is partially true. What I observed was that when you take the wheel off and the process of untorquing the nut for the stud sometimes does loosen up the stud. So I just made it a habit of making sure that I torqued them back down every time I was remounting my wheels. And I'd say like 80% of them more they never moved, because you do install them with permanent Loctite on there, and typically they don't move. However, key piece of information, and this comes straight from Mike at Ringer Racing, you can ask him, is that a stud doesn't see the final torque until the nut is torqued down onto it. And that really does make sense, because if you think about it, you thread the stud into the hub, and like it's in there, but it isn't until a nut comes down and basically pulls on the stud out towards the front of the wheel face where it sees that final tension and torque. This is 100% of a car, and the very last thing we're going to do here in this episode is all the Liqui Moly. So check this out. I already mentioned before that I'm going to be doing an engine flush, and now it's the time. Now here's something really important that I've learned through the process of installing that JHM external oil cooler is, roughly speaking, I'm going to say within about 0.1 of a liter, I believe the new engine oil capacity on the S4 with that mod is about 10.8 liters, which means that you get a smidge over an extra liter of oil capacity with that mod. If you've never done an engine flush before in the oil system, it's actually pretty easy. I do have a video on the channel right here. It's actually the most popular video I have with over 500,000 views now, so thank you guys. But all you really do is bring the engine up to temp and make sure that there's some oil capacity for that liquid. Each can is 500 milliliters, and technically it only treats about 3 to 5 liters per can. So on this engine, theoretically I should be putting in 2 cans. But remember, I have brand new oil right in here already, the Castrol for this flush, and it has some detergent. So I'm actually only going to put in 1 can, but the process is get the car running, bring it up to temp, and then put in the can and just let it idle for 10 minutes and then drain and then put in your new oil. While the engine cools down a little bit before I can drain the oil, let me just tell you about what's going in the car now, because I am putting in Moly's high-tech 5W40. 5W40 being the weights that should be run in this car, but high-tech is basically Moly's top of the class, but like regular oil. And what I mean is there's no other shtick to it. I've run the Moly gen before. That's the one that glows under UV light, and I have a video on the channel about it right there if you want to go check it out. But I'm just consolidating. I'm putting this oil in all the cars that we have now. All the cars do have more. It's on the higher end of kilometers now. They're both in the 170,000 kilometer kind of area, so it doesn't need any crazy oil. It just needs really good protection and really high quality oil. Now the big difference on the fill up is I'm going to be putting in 2 cans of this first. This is Moly's Ceratec. And the long and short of this is that it kind of just fills in the cracks. It puts a ceramic protective layer on a lot of your metal components, and you can kind of see in this visual from Moly that it's meant to just like make everything run really smooth if there was an unevenness in the surface before. And it's kind of funny, I said I was going to do a review on this a long time ago. Yes, I'm still going to do it. I don't know if anyone watching that video is going to be watching this build series, but I'm going to do a really scientific review on the performance of Ceratec in the future. Fill up time, fresh oil filter going in, almost done. All that's done, car's on the ground. I'm a little confused as to what I'm looking at here. A running and driving vehicle that's on the floor. Anyways, the last thing I'm gonna do is put in a whole bottle of this Moly Jectron cleaner. You just put it into a full tank of gas and it'll slowly clean the ends of your injectors for you. I think these are the original injectors on the car. Honestly, I'm not too sure, but I wanna make sure that my fuel is being sprayed really evenly. And even though, again, this is port injection, there's a little bit of crud on the inside of those intake runners on top of the head, and this will help clean that out just a little bit. I'm confused. I have a complete project car? Of course, it's never complete. I already got some stuff planned I'll tell you about at the very end of this episode, but last here I have one more cool thing I want to show you. And it is a vanity plate. Yeah, I had to go for it. Had to be a douche. Pulled out the custom Figure It Audi license plate here for Alberta. And honestly, if you see me rolling around the streets of Edmonton and Calgary, give me a honk, give me a wave. Let me know that you watched the channel. Say hi. I'd love to chat. So it feels like we're at the end. It's the end of this episode, but it's not the end of the build series. This is the end of part 1, but I'll tell you right now, it's gonna get awesome because this car is getting tuned and I'm going to the dyno. I wanna see what kind of actual power this thing puts down with the mods that I've done, some of the maintenance, and then I'm gonna put a jackal tune on this thing and we're gonna see what the real numbers are. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I know it was a bit of a long one, but I hope you found it entertaining and informational as always. But I might have some other stuff coming on the channel here sequentially before you see some of the next episodes on the S4 here. I got a few things going on in the garage and with the A4, so watch out for some things coming. And in the meantime, please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you soon and enjoy this outro a la Jason Camisa.